If you understand your opponent and understand yourself, you will not fear the result of 100 battles. These words were written more than 2,500 years ago by a man said to have never lost a war. But what Sun Tzu truly wanted to teach was far deeper than military tactics. Prepare yourself, because the lessons that follow can completely transform the way you see conflict, negotiation, competition, and even your personal relationships. Did you know that some of the most powerful business leaders in the world study a military text written in the 5th century before Christ? Some say American generals carried copies of The Art of War during the Vietnam War. And many of Wall Street's sharpest strategic minds consider Sun Tzu more valuable than any MBA program. But here is the most unsettling part. Sun Tzu was not really writing about war. He was revealing something far more profound about human behavior, something that applies to every situation involving pressure, conflict, competition, influence, or power. And believe me, that includes almost every part of your life. The book you are about to explore is not simply a manual about armies and battlefields. It is a psychological guide to how the human mind behaves under pressure. It teaches how to recognize weakness, use advantages, and most importantly, how to win without ever needing to fight. Before we enter the most powerful lessons of Sun Tzu, I invite you to subscribe to the channel because you are about to discover strategies that can change the way you handle challenges in your own life. Also, leave a like so this video can reach more people, and write in the comments the greatest strategic lesson you have ever learned. Now let's uncover the secrets that made this book the most studied strategy manual in human history. Chapter 1. The Ghost General. Who was Sun Tzu really? The answer may surprise you because he may not have existed at all. For centuries, historians have debated whether Sun Tzu was an actual person or a name used to represent the collective wisdom of ancient Chinese strategists. Some believe he was a real general from the state of Wu. Others argue that Sun Tzu may have been a symbolic name used by several masters of warfare. But do you know what is most interesting? It does not matter. The strategies work regardless of who first wrote them down. And that brings us to the first major lesson. In strategy, absolute truth is less important than practical results. During the Zhou dynasty, China was divided into rival kingdoms constantly fighting each other. It was a time of total instability where survival depended not only on strength, but above all on intelligence. It was in this violent environment that some of the most revolutionary principles of conflict, power, and strategy ever recorded were born. The original text of The Art of War contained only 13 chapters and 334 sentences. Yet within those sentences was a summary of everything humanity had learned about strategy up to that point. But these were not abstract theories. Every principle had been tested on real battlefields, where failure meant death. And here is something very few people understand. Sun Tzu hated war. He saw direct combat as a failure of strategy. To him, the highest strategist was not the one who crushed the enemy in battle, but the one who achieved victory without needing to fight at all. This way of thinking changed forever how we understand competition and conflict. But that is only the beginning, because the next lessons reveal strategies so powerful that emperors kept them hidden for centuries. Chapter 2: The Psychology of Deception. All warfare is based on deception. This may be the most controversial line in the entire book. But before you judge Sun Tzu as immoral, you must understand what he was really saying. Sun Tzu was not encouraging cheap lies or malicious manipulation. He was exposing a basic psychological truth. Perception becomes reality. And whoever controls perception often controls the outcome. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times has the result of a situation depended more on what people believed than on what was actually true? In your career, in relationships, in negotiations, in conflict, Sun Tzu's principle of deception works on 3 levels. First, appear weak when you are strong, and appear strong when you are weak. Second, create noise in one direction while moving in another. Third, use your opponent's expectations against them. But here is where it becomes truly brilliant. Sun Tzu was not teaching shallow manipulation. He was showing how the human mind naturally creates patterns, assumptions, and expectations, and how those expectations can be redirected strategically. A classic example comes from one of the most famous stories in Chinese history. A general was trapped inside a city with only a few hundred soldiers, while thousands of enemy troops surrounded him. Instead of surrendering or trying to flee, he did something completely unexpected. He opened the city gates. Then he sat calmly on top of the wall, playing a zither. The invading army expected desperate resistance. So when they saw this calm behavior, they assumed it had to be a trap. Afraid of an ambush, they withdrew. The general won an impossible battle using nothing but psychology. That is the essence of Sun Tzu's strategy. Win through the mind, not through force. But what comes next is even more disturbing. Chapter 3: Know the enemy. Know yourself. Sun Tzu's most famous principle hides a psychological depth that most people never notice. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. But what does it really mean to know? Sun Tzu was speaking about 3 types of knowledge. First, factual knowledge, strengths, resources, positions. Second, psychological knowledge, fears, ambitions, habits, and behavioral patterns. Third, systemic knowledge, how all the different elements connect and influence each other. But the hardest part is not knowing your opponent. The hardest part is knowing yourself. Because very often, your greatest enemy is not someone outside of you. It is you. A Harvard University researcher who studied decision-making under pressure discovered something fascinating. Most strategic failures happen because people overestimate their abilities and underestimate their limitations. They do not truly know themselves. Sun Tzu identified 5 fundamental types of leaders, each with specific strengths and weaknesses. The brave leader, who can be provoked into recklessness. The cautious leader, who can be frozen by indecision. The compassionate leader, who can be manipulated emotionally, the proud leader who can be destroyed by ego, and the strategist who knows how to balance all of these qualities. But here is the secret most people miss. You must identify not only your own type, but also the type of the person in front of you. Each type requires a different strategy, and this leads us to one of Sun Tzu's most brutal lessons. There are no purely good or purely evil people. There are interests, there are pressures, there are needs. When you understand this, you begin to see the world as it really is. But prepare yourself, because the next chapter reveals the most controversial strategy in the entire book. Chapter 4: Winning Without Fighting. The highest excellence is to defeat the enemy without battle. This sentence summarizes Sun Tzu's entire philosophy. But how exactly do you win without fighting? The answer is understanding that every conflict has layers. On the surface, we see the obvious argument, but beneath that surface, there are needs, fears, ambitions, insecurities, and hidden goals that actually drive people. Sun Tzu identified 5 ways to win without direct conflict. First, attack the enemy's plans before they are carried out. Second, weaken their alliances and sources of support. Third, disrupt their strategy with unexpected moves. Fourth, surround their position until surrender becomes inevitable. Fifth, offer them an honorable exit that also serves your own interests. But here is the revolutionary part. Sun Tzu understood that most conflicts are not really about what people claim they are about. They are about status, recognition, security, control. When you discover the real motivation, you can often create a solution that satisfies everyone. A negotiation specialist with more than 20 years of experience in corporate disputes found something interesting. In most cases, when both sides can clearly explain their real interests, they find creative solutions that neither side had considered at the beginning. This brings us to one of Sun Tzu's deepest insights. True power is not forcing people to do what you want. True power is creating a situation where doing what you want becomes the best option available to them. That difference is subtle, but it changes everything. When you force someone, you create resistance and resentment. When you shape the situation, you create natural cooperation. But Sun Tzu went even further. He understood something about human nature that very few people today fully grasp. Chapter 5: The Art of Speed. Speed is the essence of war. Sun Tzu was not only talking about moving soldiers quickly, he was revealing a psychological principle. Time is power. When you act faster than your opponent can react, you control the rhythm of the interaction. And whoever controls the rhythm often controls the result. But there is an important difference between speed and haste. Sun Tzu believed in strategic speed, not impulsive action. Strategic speed is built on preparation and quick decisions at the right moment. Haste is an emotional reaction without preparation. A neuroscientist studying decision-making under pressure found that the brain works with 2 processing speeds. The fast system, based on intuition and recognized patterns, and the slow system, based on analysis and logical thinking. Sun Tzu mastered both. He prepared with the slow system. But when the moment of action arrived, he used the fast system. This combination made him unpredictable to opponents who relied on only one mode of thinking. Speed works because it exploits a basic limitation of the human mind. We cannot efficiently process many sudden changes at the same time. When you change the situation faster than your opponent can adapt, you create what Sun Tzu called momentum. Momentum is not just speed. It is directed speed that feeds itself. Each small success creates energy for the next one. Each hesitation from your opponent opens a new opportunity for you. But Sun Tzu also understood the danger of speed. Moving quickly means making decisions with incomplete information. And this takes us to one of the most practical lessons in the book. Chapter 6: Terrain and Position. Sun Tzu devoted an entire chapter to terrain, not because he was obsessed with geography, but because he understood that context determines strategy. According to Sun Tzu, there are several types of terrain. Open terrain, where both sides can move freely. Difficult terrain, where whoever advances first may suffer. Deadlocked terrain, where neither side has a clear advantage. Narrow terrain, where position matters more than numbers. High terrain, where those above control those below. And distant terrain, where holding the position may cost more than it is worth. But here is the brilliant part. Sun Tzu used geography as a metaphor for every competitive situation. In modern life, terrain can be a market, a workplace, a social environment, a relationship dynamic, or any place where competition exists. The key lesson is simple. Your strategy must adapt to the context, not the other way around. Many people fail because they use the same approach in completely different situations. A strategic consultant who worked with more than 200 companies over 15 years noticed a clear pattern. The most successful companies were not always those with the best products. They were the ones that best understood the unique terrain of their market. Sun Tzu also knew that position is often more important than strength. A smaller army in the right position can defeat a larger army in the wrong position. This applies to almost every competitive situation in modern life. But position is never permanent. In a changing environment, you must constantly re-evaluate and reposition yourself. And this requires something Sun Tzu considered more important than courage: flexibility. And now we arrive at one of the most complex parts of Sun Tzu's philosophy. Chapter 7: Flexibility as Strength. Water does not smash itself against the rock. It finds a way around it. Sun Tzu used this metaphor to explain what he saw as the highest strategic skill: adaptability. But flexibility does not mean having no principles. It means adapting your methods while keeping your objective clear. Water always moves downward, but it never takes the exact same path twice. Sun Tzu identified 5 traits of strategic flexibility. First, having several options prepared in advance. Second, the ability to change direction quickly when circumstances shift. Third, comfort with uncertainty and ambiguity. Fourth, focus on the result rather than attachment to a specific method. Fifth, willingness to abandon plans that no longer work. The hardest part of flexibility is psychological. The brain naturally seeks patterns and stability. Constant change creates anxiety. That is why most people prefer a familiar bad strategy over an unfamiliar good one. A behavioral psychologist who studied adaptation in fast-changing environments found that only a small percentage of people can naturally remain effective when forced to change strategies often. But this skill can be trained. Sun Tzu developed this ability by studying patterns of change. He noticed that change is rarely random. There are early warning signals, emerging trends, repeating cycles. When you learn to read these signs, you can adapt before the change becomes obvious to everyone else. That creates a massive advantage. While others are reacting to change, you are already positioned for what comes next. But Sun Tzu went deeper. He understood that in complex situations, rigidity is not only ineffective, it destroys itself. And that brings us to one of the most unsettling lessons in the entire book. Chapter 8. Unity of Command. An army led by two generals does not win the battle. Sun Tzu was not only talking about military hierarchy, he was explaining a basic principle of decision-making under pressure. Command conflict does not happen only when multiple people have authority. It also happens when there is confusion about who decides what, when, and according to which rules. But here is what makes this lesson even more interesting. Sun Tzu also warned against excessive central control. The general must keep strategic control but give tactical freedom to local commanders. Why? Because information from the ground is always more accurate than information from far away. This tension between centralized control and decentralized action is one of the most difficult challenges in any organization. A leadership expert who studied more than 500 complex projects over 12 years discovered something fascinating. Projects with clear leadership but flexible execution were far more likely to succeed than projects with rigid or unclear structures. Sun Tzu solved this problem with what we now might call commander's intent. Instead of giving only detailed orders, the leader communicates the strategic objective and the principles that should guide decisions. This allows people to adapt locally while still moving in the same direction. But there is an even more subtle part of this lesson. Sun Tzu understood that unity of command is not only about structure, it is about psychological alignment. When people understand not only what to do, but why they are doing it, they naturally make better decisions even in unexpected situations. And that brings us to the deepest insight about leadership under pressure. Chapter 9. The 5 Factors of Victory. Sun Tzu identified 5 elements that determine the outcome of any strategic conflict. First, Tao, the moral purpose that inspires people to follow. Second, heaven, timing, climate and conditions. Third, earth, terrain and positioning. Fourth, command, the quality of leadership. Fifth, method, organization, discipline, logistics, and structure. But here is the genius. Sun Tzu did not say you must dominate all 5 factors. He said you must understand which factor matters most in your specific situation. Sometimes moral purpose decides everything. Sometimes timing is the key. Sometimes position matters most. Sometimes leadership makes the difference. The art is knowing which factor is decisive in your exact context. A strategic analyst who studied thousands of business successes and failures over 20 years found a pattern. Companies that failed were not necessarily weak in everything. They were weak in the one factor that mattered most at that moment. This explains why a strategy can work in one situation and fail in another. Not because the strategy is bad, but because it is optimizing the wrong factor. Sun Tzu also understood that these 5 factors constantly change in importance. What matters today may not matter tomorrow. That is why strategic evaluation is not a luxury. It is survival. But Sun Tzu went even further. He realized that most people focus only on the obvious factors and ignore the subtle ones. And often, the subtle factors decide everything. This leads us to the final lesson, one that can permanently change the way you see competition and conflict. According to research by scholars at Stanford University, only a small number of people can apply strategic principles consistently under pressure. The difference is not intellectual knowledge, it is the ability to stay mentally clear when emotions are intense. A neuroscientist specializing in decision-making explains that the most effective people are not always the most aggressive or the most technical. They are often the ones who best understand the psychology of the situation. A conflict resolution consultant with international experience found the same thing. After analyzing thousands of corporate negotiations, he discovered that the strongest negotiators were those who understood not just the facts, but the emotional architecture of the situation. Sun Tzu was not only teaching tactics, he was revealing universal patterns of human behavior under pressure. And those patterns are as relevant today as they were 2,500 years ago. But there is one lesson in the art of war that Sun Tzu almost hid. A strategy he mentioned only indirectly because it could be dangerous if misused. It took historians centuries to fully interpret it. This strategy involves what could be called the victory that does not look like victory. It is the ability to reach your objective so subtly that your opponent does not even realize they have been outmaneuvered. They simply accept the new situation as natural and inevitable. Think about it. How many times have you changed your mind about something important and later could not even remember why you once believed differently? How many times have you accepted something you would have rejected earlier simply because it was presented at the right time and in the right way? This is the highest art of strategy according to Sun Tzu, creating change that feels like natural evolution. Sun Tzu taught us that life is an endless series of strategic situations. Some are small, some are enormous, but all of them are connected by universal principles about how the human mind works under pressure, how power actually functions, and how lasting change happens. The real lesson of the art of war is not how to defeat other people. It is how to defeat yourself, how to overcome your own limitations, fears, and self-destructive impulses, how to see clearly when emotions are high, how to make effective decisions even when you do not have complete information. Because in the end, your greatest opponent was never someone else. It was always the version of you that hesitates when it should act, that acts when it should reflect, that sees what it wants to see instead of what is truly there. Sun Tzu wrote for warriors, but warriors, in the deepest sense, are not people who fight others. They are people who have the courage to face the truth about themselves and the world as it really is. The question remains, do you have the courage to apply these lessons to your own life? Even when they challenge everything you believed about how the world works? If Sun Tzu's strategies impressed you, I invite you to watch the video now appearing on your screen. This knowledge can help you in many different situations in life. And finally, I ask you once again to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you do not miss any of these strategic secrets, usually available only to a very small elite. Until the next video,